I remember there was one session
Mm.
where it said, remember a time when you were a kid and you were like really happy? Now about your teenage years, like a time when you were in flow or something like that. And then it's like, how about in the last 12 months? And I was like, professionally, zero. It's like, okay. So that was one of the sort of catalyst moments.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Tokyo Recruiters slash Life After Recruitment. I'm Levi. Thanks for being here. If you're here, then maybe you're someone who's interested in recruitment in Tokyo, or you're wondering what type of opportunities exist when you have a background in recruitment. So I hope that this podcast answers some of these questions for you. Today's guest, Jennifer Shinkai, is a great example of the many different things that you can do with this background. She's someone who started off at Wall Street Associates as a recruiter. Later, she helped with their transition into N-World as a marketing manager, as well as operations and internal trainer. After this, she started her own business, and she has gone on to author and illustrate her own book, as well as coach leaders and executives, individuals, and corporates on how to find their Ikigai and how to manage people and be good leaders. So I hope that you find this podcast informative, and as always, looking forward to your feedback. All right, Jennifer, thank you for coming on the podcast. What brought you into recruitment initially, and how was your first experience there?
I'm one of those cliches, English teacher to recruiter. So another another of those people. I was working at the head office of GEOS, so I was a teacher trainer. And doing, downsizing of schools and cross-cultural communication, all that kind of stuff. And then I was like, okay, there's nowhere up in this company for me after about 4 years. And I applied to Wall Street Associates, hoping to get like an HR or a training job. A guy, Nelson, rang me up and said, how about getting some sales experience? And I was like, like sales experience? Yeah, that might be quite useful. Had a screening interview, went along to, what was it called? Assessment Center in Wall Street Associates' old office, like a group interview. And then that was 2003. And then I joined in January 2004. I still catch up with my dokies occasionally. So it was, that's how I got into it. And I was in recruitment industry for 12 years, but as a recruiter for a year and 4 months. I checked my LinkedIn profile before we spoke. Yeah.
Excellent. And what was the reason behind that transition into another role?
Like from recruiter or
So because
to
you
be a
started out
recruiter?
as a recruiter, as
Yeah.
a consultant, and then you said you
Yeah.
moved, I guess, to more of a operational position.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Frankly, Levi, I don't think I was very good. Like, like when I look at the numbers, so I
Mm,
build, and I don't know what like people average billing. I built just under 50 million in my first year, which I
under
think is
50.
like, yeah, but
That's
it was,
great.
yeah, right. I don't know what it's like. So
That's
actually, when I look
fantastic.
back
Yeah.
and look at the numbers and go, that was actually all right. However, there was one massive placement of a CFO,
Mm,
and if he had decided not to go, then it would have been a very different number because I think the fee was like over 10 million yen or something like that. I was
mm,
just a really inconsistent biller. It was like super
mm-hmm.
stressful, I think, to manage me. Like I was getting the KPIs, but I couldn't close a deal.
Mm,
I think I was choosing the wrong jobs. I wasn't like thick skinned enough, like dealing with candidates. Clients, I was always fine.
mm-hmm.
Candidates, I just found really stressful.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I was talking, I'm trying to remember if it was Nick Johnson I was talking with or Jeremy Sanderson at the time. But they were like, I think it was Nick actually. And he's like, you've got like the right attitude. You're just on the wrong seat in the bus.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, we really want you in this company, but I'm not sure that consultant is the role for you. You've
Mm-hmm.
got a training background. We need someone to kind of support with projects and stuff. Why don't you come into an operational role? And I was like, okay, okay, yes. And I did. And so I was doing projects and training. David Sweet, who I think has been on your podcast.
Yeah.
God, I'm name dropping a lot today, aren't I? That's a good thing as a recruiter. Know a lot of people. But
Hmm.
David had left, had gone to the US, and so a training role. So I kind of took his job, and it was amazing. He'd written this brilliant curriculum. We had all the materials, and so I was really fortunate to like walk into that. And then, at the time, Wall Street was really investing a lot in onboarding and had really sorted out a lot of the issues about like high turnover from hiring. Like I think when I joined, only a third of people was making it through probation.
Hmm.
Maybe that's a bit harsh, but it was kind of like, is it worth talking to this person? Because I'm not sure that they'll survive.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
the
much,
Wild
and I
West, I
think
guess.
World now is doing
Hmm.
brilliantly. So that kind of turnover. So I think there's less hiring mistakes are being
Mm.
made, but also much better onboarding throughout the industry from 20
Hmm.
years ago. Which when I said 2004, I'm like, blooming heck, yeah. So that got me into the training role, and then I did that for a couple of years. And then we started to get a lot more Japanese consultants. I was like, I don't know if I can train people in recruitment sales in Japanese. So I negotiated a new role in the organization. Um, and then some other new roles kind
And
of came up. Yeah.
what was the new role?
So sales operations manager, we decided that we would make a sales operations kind of shared resource. So previously, these are the people who are formatting resumes, contacting candidates through job boards, quite a sales administration job, but they'd all sat separately with the teams. So we said for economies of scale, and to also stop the sense that some people were going home at 6 o'clock and other people were there till 8, but their job was the same and their skill set was the same. So why have we got this weird way of using resources? So we made a group together. I made so many mistakes as a first time manager. Oh my goodness. I was awful. And then I got a bit better and I did some work on myself. And yeah, it was going really well. And then and
Hmm.
Lehman shock and baby.
Mm.
So I
So,
remember being, I remember being in this back room with at the time Craig Saffin and John Sparks, and we were in this corridor and we'd already like downsized half the office, and they said your last job before you go on your mat leave is to downsize your team. I was like, just burst into tears, like so
oh
hormonal and
man,
like this is hard. Like these people are
yeah.
so amazing. We'd really like shifted the professionalism of the group, and people were getting like internally headhunted for jobs because they were
Mm.
so awesome. And it's like, wow, what a way to do. But it did mean that I was out of the market when everything was happening. Like,
Wow.
yeah, so it was kind of
So
the
you were on
most.
maternity leave
I
when
was on
when
that
Lehman
leave
Shock
during
happened.
that year and a bit.
Wow,
But when I came back, my job didn't exist.
that's
So I had to
tough.
renegotiate another role.
And you stayed. You managed to find another position there.
Yes, yeah. I mean, from as a full-time employee, Japanese labor law, you are the company has to offer you your old job or an equivalent level job.
Hmm.
And I was reporting to Craig Saffin at the time. He was so supportive of me, really believed in my potential. And he said, why don't you come in and work in relationship marketing, which was a great job for me,
So I want to
right?
get in. I want to
Yeah,
understand a bit more about this, but before that, I want to rewind slightly
please do.
and just asking you because now you I think work with managers in companies, and you said that you were kind of not a failed manager, but maybe it didn't come as naturally, like when you first got into that management position, but you did some work on yourself or you maybe learned something. I'm curious if there was, yeah, just something that stuck out to you that you learned or something that you had done that helped you to overcome that learning gap in some way to become a good manager.
That's a great question. Well, I think one of the things that I didn't realize going in is how resistant people would be to change and how people might react. And I was flabbergasted that I was seen as a threat. And I
Hmm.
was
And these
asking
are
questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
You're talking about who exactly? Are these like
The
other
people that I was
manager
managing.
or the people
No,
you're
the people I
managing?
was managing.
Wow.
Because yeah,
Were they older than you?
younger.
Hmm.
Um, and I'd been in the company for longer than most of them. One of the
Interesting.
situations with that role was that many people were leaving within a year because it didn't have an upward trajectory. We were hiring like a certain demographic, um, but we weren't really hiring people who wanted to be administrators. And that like service role requires you to love being in a service role and like the flexibility that's required, and the attention to detail. So I think I guess, like looking back, it's like I didn't realize how threatening it was to have someone saying, Levi, tell me exactly how you do your job. I think they thought I was trying to trick them, but my intention
Mm,
was help me to understand what you do, and then we can look how we can optimize it so that you can develop different skills, so that we can standardize things, so that instead of you going home at 8 o'clock, you can go home at 6 o'clock. Right. And you can cover for each
yeah.
other. Like you can go on a holiday because your team isn't
Mm-hmm.
doing something completely individual, but change is change.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't listen enough and I was too driving. Yeah.
Are you
So,
a driver personality or what?
but like in disc or one of
Because
those. No, I'm not as much now. But
okay.
I think when I was really trying to prove myself quite hard that I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I got probably a bit controlling. Not quite my
And
way on the
so
highway, but
yeah.
yeah,
And what helped you to kind of loosen that and be
I think some people just
become that?
quit. Just people quit, and they were like, we don't want to, like, don't want to work with you, and the people
Mm,
who weren't kind of with my vision, and then I hired like a different type of person,
mm,
people who like wanted to be career administrators and saw the value of that role,
mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's really heartening to I think I don't know if she's still there, and I won't mention her name, but I remember um, there was someone who joined, and she was totally different from anyone that we'd hired before. She was a mum, she's much more senior, and I think she was one of the best people in this role. And she stayed with Enwell for a long time. She might have left now, but yeah, she was amazing. So like change, like bringing diversity into the team. I remembered I wanted to. I said we need to get some guys in this team. It's all women. This is terrible.
Mm.
And when I like was interviewing the first couple of guys, people were like, "Is he clean?" Because they had this image of maybe some kind of dirty, smoking oyaji guy with like dandruff all on his suit. And I was like, is he wow, okay, there's some not even unconscious bias here. And we hired,
Wow.
again, another amazing guy. So
Mm,
good. But it was really interesting to observe how differently the sales team interacted with him. They were always trying to like, why don't you come to sales? Like, this isn't a job for a man. And how can you like
mm,
raise your family? And kudos to him. I remember because I tried to get him to be promoted to a team leader, and he's like, I don't really want it. I like this. I like this pace. I like this lifestyle. I like being home
mm.
to cook dinner for my wife. And I was like, oh, amazing.
It's
Yeah.
nice to
Yeah,
yeah. That's great that he found a place for himself, and I think this is some of what we're dealing with maybe as coaches. If something's not going well, it's maybe just a question of are you in the right position, right? Are you
yeah,
really prioritizing your needs, or are you just going for the expectations, bending to the expectations of others? Maybe
exactly.
so. It's great to
Yeah.
have that kind of respect and a good fit. So, and how was that transition for you after maternity leave coming back? I know that can be kind of um, jerky, transition wise, and especially after a huge global financial crisis, on top
Yeah.
of a leave and a career break. So, how was that coming back into the industry?
Yeah. Well, I was coming into a totally new role,
Mm-hmm.
but things were on the uptick and had great manager. I think I do remember some of those challenges. There was an early event that we put together, and one of the clients who'd had a bit too much to drink kind of pulled me over and said, "What you lot are doing is so awful. You're like the pimps, like you're pimping out people." And I was like, took myself off into the bathroom, had a little cry. This is a big theme of my my career, crying in the toilets. But I was like, what am I doing here? Like, I could be at home with my darling daughter, and I'm out here with this guy saying that I'm like working in the lowest of the low industries. Like, what's going on? But then, I talked to my manager about it, and I were lots of other clients who were really appreciative. So I kind of, blacklisted this guy. He didn't get invited to any more of our free parties. And I just see so much that, like, what recruitment is doing as an industry, and the role of the recruiter, who is, to be honest, often just smoothing out people saying stupid things to each other and taking a lot of hits for the team. And people going, "It's just you, Levi. You're in it for your commission. There's no way a candidate would say this." And you're like, "No, I'm really saying it for the candidate."
You're kind of filtering the messages.
Yeah,
so
right.
And
I just think there's quite a lot of wonderful introductions and like life-changing entries into organizations, or people joining teams who are really changing the trajectory for the manager. And I'm not sure if some of them would have happened without a recruiter in the mix, right? So being that middle person to, filter conversations and smooth things out. And maybe sometimes you have to say, "Yeah, it's just me being greedy for the commission," right? I think that's a really, really important role.
Definitely. I mean, there's a lot of value add, I think, not just from finding the people, which obviously is extremely difficult in Japan, but managing that process, like you said, or sometimes getting someone and shaking them and saying, "You're unhappy. This is a solution to make you maybe feel better." But I guess speaking from that, because there are many solutions maybe to why someone is feeling a certain way, and you are now a coach for the past 8.5 years, is that right?
Yeah. Checking that on my LinkedIn profile too.
Almost a full decade of coaching. And what was you're the dai senpai of coaching in Japan? I think it hasn't really existed in the same way as it is popular in the States. I have a lot of senpais.
So there are definitely wonderful people who have with many more years experience in the Japan market. Yeah.
I'm really curious about
a question that was going to come in.
No, I'm curious about what coaching was like when you first started. Was it quite different than this? And when you're looking at that person who has almost a decade of experience when you're starting out, did that influence your decision, or how did you get into this? Just in general, just talk about maybe the landscape and what's on your mind getting into it.
Well, you're stacking a lot of questions there, Levi. Which
I'm sorry, there's so many questions.
But it's also, as a coach, right, something I've had feedback on. I'm like so curious, and I want to ask this and this and this. So maybe
what brought you? Yeah.
What brought me? I can answer that question. We might bring up some others. So
I'm sure.
I've shared a lot of lovely stuff about my experience at Wall Street and N-World, but like the last couple of years were really hard. I came back from second maternity leave and had to take a really long leave because my son couldn't get into daycare. So I was out of the business for like 16 months and I didn't know if I would come back. And in that time, the company was planning to do a lot of M&A. I was like, I think this job is going to be too big for me when we're APAC wide. You need to hire a marketing director, which was the right decision for the company, but probably wasn't the right decision for me. Because in retrospect, I realized how much I loved being like close to the seat of power. I was on the leadership team. I was reporting directly to the CEO. And then suddenly I'm like, oh, hang on, I'm a middle-level manager now. Didn't really like that. And I was also in a digital marketing role, which I thought was going to be more like social media manager, more about like connecting with people. And it was actually a lot of like being on Google Trends and AdWords, I can't even remember, and like creating a lot of Excel sheets, and just not my area. So I was just really incompetent in my job, and I felt really disconnected from a lot of people. I worked, and to be fair to my manager, he did work with me to try to find a role that was better suited to my skills and was also aligned with what the company needed. But it just never really clicked for me. So I started to work with a coach, and I was also at that time I was running a lean in circle, and I decided to make a lean in circle for, it was very niche. It was English
What is
speaking.
lean in?
Lean in is from like I guess a mid-end book by Sheryl Sandberg, and it's all about, lean into your career as a woman and all of these things. It's a little bit kind of dated chat now, and there's quite a lot of like privilege at play in the conversations that she's having. But what was really special was they had these lean in circles where we would get together as a kind of a support group, with people who are in similar ages and stages in their career. And we would talk about topics about time management, about negotiation. Like there was all this content. And I was like in these sessions going, oh my God, I'm feeling alive. And I remember there was one session where it said, remember a time when you were a kid and you were like really happy and like how you used to play, and so were you alone, were you with other people? And I was like, now about your teenage years, like a time when you were in flow or something like that. And then it's like, how about in the last 12 months? And I was like, professionally, 0. It's like, okay. So that was one of the sort of catalyst moments. Oh, it was just that moment when my body said enough. And so I started to work with a coach, and I did like informational interviewing. Yeah. And good, amazing coach. So there's one of my senpais. And yeah, I started talking to different people about like different roles. Actually, I was really interested in going into event management. Then talking to an HR mentor of mine, she was saying, well, training and facilitation and coaching is event management too. You can still use those skills. And then I talked to another HR mentor, and he was like, the role that you're talking about is a practitioner. And of course, I'm working in a recruitment company, so I'm looking at all of the HR, the L&D manager jobs, all of these. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just like, I'm not doing, none of these jobs are saying like delivering training. Okay, so maybe, yeah, I want to be a practitioner. And he said, so your option is just to set up your own business. I can't. And then I talked to my husband, and he said, I'll pay the mortgage for a year just so you don't have that. And then that was it. And I think I decided in February, waited for my bonus in April, resigned like the day after my bonus, and then had all my paid holidays. And I think I left the company like just before Golden Week, and then officially started my business on June the 20th.
Wow.
2016.
And had you taken some seminars or some kind of trainings to be a coach, or what was your style back then?
Yeah, so well, that's the interesting thing about, I decided to train with the International Coach Academy, which is an International Coaching Federation approved course. And it blew my mind, because all of the stuff that I thought I knew about coaching, I didn't know about coaching. I just told you what like directive driver I was. It's like, oh yeah, actually you don't know the answers, and you do stack your questions. That's why I was quick to catch it. And yeah, so going through that, the peer coaching and mental coaching. And I remember there was a coaching session with Anne, and I decided that I wanted to go back into L&D. And she said, well, why don't you stay in your job and like retrain whilst you're working? And I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to be sick. Just the thought of that. So I was like, okay.
You could feel that.
That's definitely. So it was quite a leap of faith. And I wasn't doing much coaching in that first year because I was building skills, but I was doing more training because I hadn't been in the training room officially for a long time, but I'd still been presenting and sharing information as a marketing manager. So, and doing the lean in circles had kind of got me back in the room literally back in the room with people, managing time, taking people through content, creating a safe environment. So yeah, so I started that, and I was doing a lot of like cross-cultural training the first couple of years, presentation skills. And then now my business has totally shifted.
How has it evolved?
Well, I'm glad I didn't go into event management, because obviously COVID would have been quite tough for that.
Yeah.
But in COVID, I think is maybe the biggest change that happened because everything went online.
Mm.
I trained online and coached online before. And actually, my coach training had all been on the telephone, like over Skype.
Wow,
Yeah.
not even
So no
video.
visuals, only voice.
Wow.
So when people say, "Oh, I feel really old saying that," but that's how it was. It was yeah, Skype calls, no camera. So I was like, well, I think I can do this. And then I started to get more inquiries from APAC. It became about having, time zone is the new geography when you're working online. So are you available to work when people are awake? And there's having someone who's living in Asia as well and understanding, like, obviously Asia, there's so many different cultures represented, but it's very different than like living in the UK. Yeah, so that really, really helped. So that's a big evolution. And actually, I realized that because my kids have needed quite a lot of support in the last couple of years, being able to work remotely has been huge for me to be able to be here for them, but also, to support my family financially has really been great.
That's fantastic. And to see how it's kind of evolved as well. I'm curious about the audience, like your clients.
Mm.
Did those change over time, like who you were working with before versus now?
Well, obviously, when you're doing things face to face, you're mostly working with people in Japan. And
Mm-hmm.
now I've got clients, a lot of clients in India, China, Hong
Mm.
Kong, Singapore,
Wow.
Korea, Japan. So I think that's the difference. But one thing which sort of ties everyone together, because my clients are mostly corporate rather than I have a number of individual clients who are sponsoring themselves, but they're mostly people who have high potential. They are on like an upward trajectory in their organization. And it's about letting go of some of the patterns that have got them to where they are, that
Mm.
are going to get in the way of them being like the next level leader. So to
Mm-hmm.
become, a director of directors or a manager of managers.
Mm.
So it's a lot about breaking those patterns. Whereas I think earlier in my coaching career, I was doing a lot more like, let's do presentation skills. So it's a bit more about self-limiting beliefs or patterns which you might need to shift, new patterns or mechanisms that you might need to put into place.
I know
And
it's
then working as well as a systems coach, I do co-coaching of systems, of teams. And that's
mm,
really rewarding. And that tends to be more face-to-face, done bilingually with my wonderful colleague, Diego Iber, who's an amazingly talented coach. And I really love working with her. So those are all like executive committee
excellent.
teams that we work with.
Excellent. And in terms of the changes that you're making, is there some commonality that you see with people that are trying to go to the next